Crazy. The Google definition of that word reads as mentally deranged, especially as manifested in a wild or aggressive way. It's a word that gets thrown around a lot in our society. Artists from Aerosmith to Gnarls Barkley to Britney Spears have sung about it, and it's become so commonly used in casual conversation that we almost don't even notice it anymore. It's a word I think about when I remember Ricky Williams. Williams was a professional running back in the NFL for much of the 2000s after putting together one of the most impressive college careers in football history at the University of Texas. I remember watching him play for the New Orleans Saints when I was just a kid. More than his play on the field, though, I remember his behavior off of it. He used to conduct post-game interviews with his helmet and visor still on, not wishing to look anyone directly in the eye. He occasionally gave unusual responses to questions and reportedly lived in an apartment with no windows or natural lighting at all, due to the fact that, as one person put it, he was only ever comfortable when he was alone in a dark room. What really stood out to me about Williams, though, was what happened after his time with the Saints came to an end. After 2 successful seasons with the Miami Dolphins, Williams abruptly announced his retirement from professional football in July of 2004, just 2 months after his 27th birthday. Coming off the best 2 seasons of his career, and right in the middle of his prime, the announcement sent shockwaves throughout the league. Williams briefly moved to California, where he studied holistic medicine for a time. Though I was only 12, I remember the thought that went through my mind when all this was happening. Man, Ricky Williams is crazy. A year later, comedian Dave Chappelle abruptly left production of the 3rd season of his Comedy Central TV program, Chappelle Show. One of the most successful sketch comedy programs of all time, despite running just 2 seasons, Chappelle found himself mentally stressed by the workload and the direction the network was steering things in. In May of 2005, he made the decision not only to leave the show, but to make an impromptu trip to South Africa for several weeks. Though he later said this trip was just to get away from the fame and pressure and quiet his mind, there were immediately rumors that Chappelle was dealing with drug addiction or a mental breakdown of some sort. After all, leaving the show meant Chappelle walked away from a $50 million contract with Viacom. Many who saw what happened just said, "Man, Dave Chappelle is crazy." In December of 2005, long after Chappelle had returned to the United States, he made an appearance on Inside the Actors Studio with James Lipton. He discussed his unhappiness working on Chappelle's show, the fact that his father died 7 years earlier and he never properly mourned that loss, the racial tone of some of the sketches, and his trip to Africa. He also talked about the people who called him crazy for leaving behind $50 million.
The worst thing to call somebody is crazy. It's dismissive. I don't understand this person, so they're crazy. That's bullshit. These people are not crazy. They're strong people. Maybe their environment is a little sick.
I didn't see the Inside the Actors Studio interview or hear that quote until my junior year of high school. When I did, though, I thought back to Ricky Williams. I decided to read up on the legendary running back, who unretired in July of 2005. What I hadn't known in my youth was that Williams had been diagnosed with social anxiety disorder when he was with the Saints. He was also diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and avoidant personality disorder. All of this helped to explain his behavior and why he'd walked away from millions of dollars and a career in the NFL when he was still in his prime. That's when I realized maybe Chappelle was right. Just because I didn't understand Williams didn't mean he was crazy. My name is Hart Pisani. I'm a sports reporter from New Orleans, currently based in Joliet, Illinois. I'm also a recovering alcoholic with Tourette's syndrome and ADHD. I've been a sports fan pretty much my whole life, and I've been reporting on them professionally since 2017. I got sober for the second time in my life in April of 2019. It was during that process that I was also diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, depression, and obsessive-compulsive disorder. At some point in my first year of sobriety, I thought back to Ricky Williams. He'd long been retired for good at this point, but I thought back to those words, "Man, Ricky Williams is crazy." I can tell you there were certainly people who thought the same thing about me at some point or another before I quit drinking. I was sober for 2 years the first time I quit, but my anxiety and OCD went untreated. During that stretch, there were surely people who thought I was crazy too. While I'll be the first to tell you that I'm eccentric, different, and even a little weird, I know I'm not crazy. While I may not have understood him, and maybe I still don't, that doesn't mean Ricky Williams is crazy either. Though it was around this time that I realized there were probably far more people out there who felt the way I did back in 2004. I thought of all the stories I heard about sports and mental health, and I began to wonder. While athletes such as Kevin Love and DeMar DeRozan had publicly acknowledged their struggles with clinical depression, and while more funding and research have begun to pour into mental health and athletics, why did it feel like we still had so many conversations about how quote-unquote crazy some athletes were? What if there was more to their stories than just what we saw on the surface? Moreover, while athletes such as Love and DeRozan had opened the door to talking about these subjects, why weren't more people raising these issues? Then I thought, why don't I do it? Aside from 2 years as a JV bench warmer for my high school basketball team, I've never been an athlete. While I've been through enough therapy over the years, I should probably hold an honorary degree from somewhere. I'm also not a mental health expert. I'm not certified, licensed, or formally educated in the field of psychology, psychiatry, or any other aspect of mental health, which is probably a good thing to keep in mind moving forward. I do know sports though, and I know storytelling. I also made sure to speak with multiple mental health professionals and do my research before, during, and after putting this podcast together. After starting and stopping work on this podcast in 2019, I finally started putting major work into it during the summer of 2023. The 6 episodes that follow are the final product. Keep in mind, I put most of this together on my own. This project is entirely self-financed and put together with limited resources. That's not to brag. It's to give you fair warning ahead of time that it's far from perfect. It is, however, as close to perfect as I can make it. Each episode that follows focuses on a different aspect of mental health as it applies to athletics. The first topic wasn't too hard to choose. It's something that every athlete at every level deals with at some point. Something that's become more and more prevalent over the years as things like social media and technology have developed. It's also seemingly where many mental health issues always seem to stem from. Pressure. This is a podcast examining what happens at the intersection of mental health and athletics. It's about taking a look at the human side of those we often view as superhuman. It's an investigation into how it feels internally on a stage that's so external. Most importantly, it's a conversation about people under the brightest of lights and what happens to them when the lights go out. Episode 1, Being Todd Marinovich. We all know that one parent. You know, the one always in the stands yelling at the coach during football games to play their kid. The one always hovering over their child and telling them how to talk, how to handle a certain situation, where they should go to school. The one constantly yelling at the ref to call the game in their kid's favor. The one that's usually quick to tell you about how they used to be quite the athlete themselves back in the day, but something or another got in their way and prevented them from reaching their potential. Yeah, we all know that one parent. In recent memory, no one has embodied that persona to a greater level of notoriety than Jake San Miguel. Jake was a standout running back in high school and even played collegiately at the Division II level for Emporia State University. By his own account, his drug usage prevented him from playing at a higher competition level. He also claims to have been in and out of jail for various low-level offenses throughout his life, and that his own father is currently in prison for murder. Despite those circumstances, Jake has always had a plan going back to his own childhood.
I had this blueprint from when I was 15 to 16 years old about what I was going to do with my own son. I didn't want him to fail like I did, so I sought out to break the family curse.
On November 4th, 2012, Jake's son, Madden San Miguel, was born. Jake named him after legendary football coach John Madden. Jake began getting Madden involved in football once he was 5 and placed Madden on a strict diet consisting of chicken, rice, yogurt, oatmeal, and apples, while also monitoring his fitness routine regularly. Madden's immense size became evident early on. By the time he was 9 years old, he was already 4'9" and 88 pounds. Jake, a digital marketer, saw the way the internet and social media had developed already by the time the COVID-19 pandemic rolled around. He used YouTube videos to help Madden develop and learn the game of football. Jake began posting videos of Madden to Instagram and various other social media sites. By August of 2020, just before Madden turned 7, his Instagram profile had already garnered over 100,000 followers, including Dallas Cowboys running back Ezekiel Elliott, San Francisco 49ers tight end George Kittle, and former Pro Bowl cornerback Aqib Talib. Internationally recognized hip-hop artist Boozy signed Madden to his marketing and sports management group. It was during this time, Madden came to be known for the moniker you may be familiar with, Baby Gronk. Beyond meeting celebrities, Jake took advantage of the social media fame Madden began to develop, bringing him to various universities such as Oregon, Oklahoma, and LSU, while also taking him to Dallas Cowboys practices. Jake acknowledged it would be difficult for Madden to make it to the NFL one day, but his hope was that with the development of endorsement deals, Madden would be set for life, even if he weren't to make it that far. Jake's even on record as saying,
"The goal is to be a millionaire by senior year, with or without football."
By June of 2023, the Baby Gronk account had garnered upwards of 500,000 followers across all social media platforms. Madden and Jake continued meeting with celebrities such as Shaquille O'Neal and Mark Wahlberg. But it was a March 15th, 2023 meeting with another athlete with a prominent social media following that brought the brightest spotlight yet onto the San Miguels. That was the date when Baby Gronk met Livy Dunn. A 21-year-old native of New Jersey, Dunn had been a member of the LSU gymnastics team since 2020. When the NCAA began allowing athletes to profit off their name, image, and likeness on July 2nd, 2021, Dunn was immediately expected to become one of the highest-earning college athletes in the United States. That was primarily due to having garnered over 5 million followers on TikTok and Instagram at that time. By February of 2023, Dunn was the most followed college athlete on social media, with more than 7 million TikTok followers and 4 million followers on Instagram. In May of the same year, she was estimated to be the highest-earning female athlete in college sports, with an estimated value of $3.3 million. That value places her third overall behind only Deion Sanders' son Shadur and LeBron James' son Bronny, who were valued at $4.1 million and $6.1 million respectively. She's estimated that her total endorsement deals topped 7 figures and that she received more than $500,000 for a single social media post. Dunn is also widely viewed as a sex symbol, having modeled for the Sports Illustrated swimsuit catalog and other outlets. That last part came into play when she met Madden. Jake claims that he connected with Dunn via mutual friends and set up a meeting on LSU's campus. He proceeded to film and post a video of Madden meeting Dunn, in which the influencer, wearing a crop top and leggings, brought in a visibly uncomfortable Madden for a hug while convincing him to verbally commit to LSU at 11 years old. The video actually didn't pick up much steam until several months later when it was reposted to the platform previously known as Twitter, where it quickly went viral. Once that happened, the backlash towards Jake was immediate. While Dunn never does anything objectively inappropriate herself, many viewed the video as a sexually charged marketing strategy constructed by Jake for internet clout. From there, the entire Baby Gronk persona came under fire, notably at first from three-time NFL Defensive Player of the Year, J.J. Watt.
Kids should play multiple sports, and kids should be allowed to be kids. No kid should be playing one sport all year, and no kid should be training, quote, like a pro until at least high school.
Former NFL defensive end Chris Long, the son of Hall of Famer Howie Long, also joined in on the criticism.
I have no problem with profiting off the internet. This is what we're all doing. But the difference is we're not using a 10-year-old kid to do it.
Former NFL tight end Rob Gronkowski, the inspiration for the Baby Gronk nickname, spoke out on June 28th. He said Jake had attempted to contact him more than 500 times in the prior month. He criticized the fad, saying it had gone too far and calling it annoying on a podcast with NFL offensive lineman Taylor Lewin and Will Compton. Lewin and Compton encouraged Gronkowski to try and put a stop to the promotion, and Gronkowski finally threatened to file a cease and desist order against Jake. Initially, the controversy didn't deter Jake from pushing onward. He called his critics haters and labeled them as out of touch.
It's a new era, a new generation. The people that are normally jealous of us are kinda older. They just don't get it. The times have changed. Elon Musk is about to move us to Mars.
Of course, this is far from the first time that a sports parent has come under scrutiny for the pressure they put on their child. Tiger Woods' father, Earl, made a career out of promoting him throughout his youth, while there was literally a whole movie made about how Venus and Serena Williams' father, Richard, coached them from their childhood to be what they are now. The presence of social media and the internet just makes it more prominent in this day and age. More than the Woods or Williams family, though, the relationship between Jake and Madden San Miguel reminded me far more of another father-son relationship. One that was on display before I was born, but was brought to my attention in college thanks to a documentary on ESPN. Jake reminded me of a 21st century version of a man named Marv, who played in the NFL before becoming one of the league's first ever strength and conditioning coaches. Madden, meanwhile, reminded me of his son, one of the most legendary high school athletes of all time, a Southern California football legend and former first-round pick of the NFL draft. Madden San Miguel reminded me quite vividly of...
Hi, my name is Todd Marinovich, and I currently am a father and a coach and an artist.
For those of you who are old enough and followed football in the 80s, that name should sound very familiar. If you're a fan of the ESPN 30 for 30 film series, you may also recognize it. For everyone else, Todd Marinovich was once known by many other names, such as Bionic Kid and RoboQB. But going into his story, just know that Todd Marinovich was pretty much the OG Baby Gronk. I first became aware of Todd in 2011 following the Heisman Trophy presentation when ESPN aired his 30 for 30 documentary with a name we'll get into in a moment. I reached out to him early in the process of making this podcast and was pleasantly surprised when he reached out, saying he would be interested in talking to me. Todd's story actually begins in the early 60s, a little less than a decade before he was born. His father Marv was a star offensive lineman for the University of Southern California, winning a national title in 1962. His mother Trudy was a talented high school swimmer, while his uncle was the starting quarterback for the Trojans in the mid-60s. Marv's own NFL career was cut short due to overtraining and placing too much emphasis on bulk. After realizing his playing days were over, Marv began studying strength training methods developed in the Eastern Bloc of the Soviet Union. His focus on building others' bodies led him to become one of the first ever strength and conditioning coaches in NFL history when he was hired by Al Davis, the owner of the then Oakland Raiders. He went on to open his own athletic research center, and at some point prior to Todd's birth in 1969, he had an idea.
Some guys think the most important thing in life is their jobs, the stock market, whatever. To me, it was my kids. The question I asked myself was, how well could a kid develop if you provided him with a perfect environment?
And so began what ESPN's 30 for 30 later referred to as the Marinovich Project. Even before he was born, Todd was being bred for athletics. While she was pregnant, Marv insisted that Trudy not use any salt or sugar. And when he was a baby, Todd was fed only fresh vegetables, fruits, and raw milk. It's not hyperbole when I say Marv was giving Todd training techniques to use before he was old enough to leave the crib, including the basis for what went on to become modern core training. By the time Todd was 4 years old, Marv had him running 4 miles a day.
I don't think I'm different than a lot of young boys when they get caught doing what their old man is doing because they just, like I just wanted to be around my dad. Did I really want to play? I don't even know. I don't know. I just knew that's what he did.
There were times in Todd's youth when it became clear to Trudy that the pressure was weighing on him. She once took off with Todd without telling Marv where they were going out of concern for what might happen. Still, as time went on, so too did the Marinovich Project, and Todd's development at quarterback began to take shape. By the time Todd reached high school, the hype was already forming. He initially attended Mater Dei High School in Orange County. That's the same high school that later went on to produce quarterbacks such as NFL player Matt Barkley, national champion Matt Leinart, and Heisman Trophy winner Bryce Young. Before any of them, however, there was Todd Marinovich, who became the first freshman to start at quarterback in the history of the program and the history of Orange County. In 2 years at Mater Dei, he passed for just under 4,400 yards and 34 touchdowns. However, despite his on-field success, there was tension at home. In the Marinovich Project, Trudy stated that she felt the mood of the family was based around Todd's play. When Todd would have a bad game, Marv would force him to run home while following behind in his car. Marv's obsession with Todd's training also contributed to financial issues that added stress to the family. After Todd's second season at Mater Dei, Marv and Trudy separated and began the process of divorce. As a result, Todd transferred to Capistrano Valley High School in Mission Viejo. He and Marv lived in a small apartment the next 2 years. Todd later told Esquire magazine that this was actually a positive time for him. It was also a great time for Todd on the field. He broke the Orange County career passing record by the time he finished high school with 9,914 yards, including 2,477 his senior year. He was named a Parade Magazine All-American and was the Touchdown Club's National High School Player of the Year. The honors, recognition, and his high level of play also brought outside attention from the media. This was in a time long before Rivals.com or 24/7 Sports. ESPN didn't broadcast high school games, and there were no year-round scouting camps. Yet Todd was at the center of nearly everyone's radar. But as he pointed out in the Marinovich Project, the focus wasn't on his play or records as much as it was on his training and diet. In January of 1988, California Magazine released an article on Todd titled RoboQB, The Making of a Perfect Athlete. The following month, Sports Illustrated published an article entitled Bred to be a Superstar on his upbringing with Marv. The article referred to Todd as a test tube athlete and talked about how Trudy encouraged his interest in art, music, and classical Hollywood films. It also discussed Marv's assembly of football advisors to help Todd study the game. The writer of the article, Douglas S. Looney, noted the diet above all else.
He has never eaten a Big Mac, or an Oreo, or a Ding Dong. When he went to birthday parties as a kid, he would take his own cake and ice cream to avoid sugar and refined white flour. He would eat homemade catsup, prepared with honey. He did consume beef, but not the kind injected with hormones. He ate only unprocessed dairy products. He teethed on frozen kidney and liver. When Todd was 1 month old, Marv was already working on his son's physical conditioning. He stretched his hamstrings. Push-ups were next. Marv invented a game in which Todd would try to lift a medicine ball onto a kitchen counter. Marv also put him on a balance beam. Both activities grew easier when Todd learned to walk. There was a football in Todd's crib from day one. Not a real NFL football, says Marv. That would be sick.
Sick is how Todd felt about the attention spent to his diet. As he said in the Marinovich project, the focus on his eating habits was unhealthy. He told me the same thing in 2023.
Being on covers of magazines at that age and asking me questions about my diet, and I felt like a freak because it seemed to me then that was the reason for the articles. My ability on the field came secondary. It was always the diet first. And so I felt separated completely, like, wow. I never doubted how I was raised until the media got a hold of it. And then all this scrutiny about how my dad raised me.
While Trudy's influence piqued Todd's interest in the arts, the push to play football had him in a position where all of the world's eyes were on him. Though he knew which direction he wanted to gravitate towards, he was also just a teenager, trying to figure out his place in the world with a microscope on him at all times.
I truly believe I was an artist first and pretended to be a quarterback. And I did a pretty good job pretending. But I was done with that pretending long before I actually was done playing. What really tore me up early on was this double life. I couldn't be honest. And I didn't think that fibbing or being dishonest or lying to people to protect this other life was going to disturb me the way that it did. I didn't realize that. And until I got to this breaking point where I could not, because of what I used to do and because of the position I played in the part of the world that I played in, every time I walked into practice, there were microphones. And they were asking me questions that I felt like if I was honest, I wouldn't have a job.
During his time at Capistrano, Todd began to seek ways of relieving pressure off himself when Marv wasn't around. He began drinking at post-game parties and smoking marijuana on a regular basis. He met with skaters, surfers, musicians, and other athletes before school to smoke out of a bong during a time known as zero period. Todd struggled with social anxiety and found at the time that pot didn't impact his performance on the field. Word of his pot smoking began to reach other schools throughout the area, and in typical high school fashion, opposing fans gave him a new nickname, one they chanted at him when he'd attempt free throws during basketball games: Marijuanavich. While Todd was able to tune the chants out during the game, they stayed with him after the clock hit zero and the lights went out.
I wanted to fit in. I was super shy. If it wasn't for athletics, I'd have been a loner and would have had very, very few friends because I was in fear. I was in fear of everybody and everything. And I was really scared of what you thought of me. So thank God for sports. And I really think it was my first drug because it changed the way I felt. And all of my school problems vanished when I got to lock into whatever ball I was trying to hit, field, shoot, or throw.
So he kept playing. And he kept playing well. In fact, he kept playing so well that nearly every top football program in the nation came after him, hoping to win his services. He received letters from Stanford when he was still a freshman. Washington and Arizona State vied for his services as well. 1984 national champion BYU and 1987 national champion Miami also came a courting. In the end, though, His parents' alma mater won out. Todd Marinovich became a USC Trojan. Todd entered USC as a fine arts major in the fall of 1988. Future NFL player Rodney Peete was firmly entrenched as the starter, with plenty of depth and experience on the roster already, allowing Todd to take a redshirt year. Despite this, the spotlight remained heavy on him, with the workload of school and the gridiron also taking a toll. The expectations were high and the pressure on, despite not taking the field. To top it off, for the first 18 years of Todd's life, Marv's eye was fixed on him like Sauron to the one true ring. For the first time, that gaze was snapped.
I was so scared. And so college was just a blast. I didn't have the dictatorship of my father there. He completely just let me go and said, enjoy life. And prior to that, I was making no decisions. The only decision I knew I had to make was show up at practice every day at 2 o'clock. The rest of the day is wide open.
After Peete departed for the NFL, Todd was named backup to Pat O'Hara in the 1989 season following Todd's slow showing in spring practice. However, O'Hara suffered a leg injury in fall camp, putting his status for the beginning of the year in question. USC was coming off a 10-2 season, a Pac-10 championship, and an appearance in the Rose Bowl. They featured future NFL Hall of Famer Junior Seau on defense, and were in prime position to make a run at the national championship, entering the season ranked 5th in the country. Head coach Larry Smith didn't feel Todd was ready to start. Todd's own teammates didn't think he was ready either. But the combination of outside pressure, lack of other viable options, and the belief that he was simply too talented to let sit led to Todd's insertion into the starting lineup. On September 4th, 1989, against 22nd ranked Illinois, Todd Marinovich became the first freshman to start at QB on opening day for USC since World War II. That game wound up being a 14-13 loss, but from there, Todd began to flourish on the field. Against conference rival Washington State, Todd led a 91-yard march down the field with 11 completions in the final minute, tossing the game-winning touchdown pass and 2-point conversion. The moment became known as the Drive among USC fans, and Todd's impressive play earned him a personal invitation to the Los Angeles home of U.S. President Ronald Reagan. On the year, Todd threw 16 touchdown passes compared to just 12 interceptions, while completing 61.4% of his passes. That's just 0.1% behind Bernie Kosar's NCAA freshman record. USC went 9-2-1 that year, won the Pac-10 championship once again, and defeated Michigan in the Rose Bowl. UPI and Sporting News named Todd the College Freshman of the Year, and he was the only freshman on the all-conference team for the Pac-10. On the field, everything was coming up roses. Off the field, however, it was anything but. Todd began experimenting beyond just marijuana. His drinking picked up, and he started taking other drugs. Mentally, the toll of national pressure and expectations continued to weigh on him.
I was never comfortable being in the public eye, and you would think being a quarterback and there are guys that just love it, that want to be the center of attention, and I was never that way. That's why I wanted to play wide receiver when I was little growing up. I did not want to be the guy that had to speak. I was like, I just want to do my position, maybe catch a few passes, a touchdown here and there, and leave it at that. But yeah, my journey took another course, and I was thrust into a position that gets way too much praise and applaud when they do what the quarterback does well, and way too much criticism when the team doesn't do well. It's part of the territory. So that's why I have empathy for every quarterback at every level. And I remember saying to my mom, I need to go. I don't want to be Todd Marinovich. Is there any place on this planet where I can just fit in? And she said, yes, it's called Ireland. And so that off season, me and my best friend, Tommy Tracy, went to Ireland. And she said, as long as you don't open your mouth, you'll fit right in. And I got to do that.
But when Todd returned to America, the expectations and pressure remained for him. He was viewed as a Heisman Trophy candidate entering the 1990 season. Once the year was over, he'd be eligible to enter the NFL draft early, which many expected him to do. It wasn't just outside sources putting pressure and expectations on him. It was his own head coach. Smith set a goal for Todd to hit a 70% completion percentage on the year. Todd never even came near those numbers, with his play becoming erratic due to his off-field issues. His play against the University of Arizona, coupled with the fact that Smith found out Todd had been skipping class, led to his benching and suspension for the game against Arizona State. When Todd later regained his starting job, he had to deal with boos from the home crowd. His completion percentage dropped to 60%, with a touchdown to interception ratio of 13 to 12. While the Trojans went 8-4-1 and finished ranked 20th in the country, they were unable to repeat as Pac-10 champions and had to settle for an appearance in the John Hancock Bowl, a far cry from the national title contenders they were expected to be. Smith and Todd's relationship continued to deteriorate, with the two getting into a screaming match on national television during the bowl game. Todd noted in the Marinovich Project that his play was so maligned it was a national headline during the middle of the Gulf War. Once the season came to an end, Todd's private struggles began to become public. A month after the John Hancock Bowl, he was arrested for possession of cocaine. Coupled with his disappointing play on the field, reports of cutting class, and his contentious relationship with his head coach, it became clear that Todd's days at USC were numbered. While it didn't come with the Heisman Trophy and fanfare many expected, Todd announced shortly after his arrest that he planned to enter the 1990 NFL Draft, foregoing the rest of his college eligibility. Even after everything, NFL scouts still salivated at Todd's untapped potential. At 6'4", 220 pounds, he had the kind of size teams dreamed of, and all the raw tools were still there. A team was going to be willing to roll the dice on Todd. It was just a matter of who and when. Those familiar with the history of the NFL can probably think of one team, and owner in particular, who always had a penchant for taking risks on players with phenomenal size, athleticism, and untapped potential, with a history of off-field baggage. It was the same owner and team that gave Marv his strength and conditioning job, the team that was right there in Todd's backyard. On April 21st, 1991, it was that team that selected Todd as he answered the phone during the NFL Draft. It was Al Davis, owner of the now Los Angeles Raiders, calling to inform Todd that they planned to select him with the 21st overall pick of the NFL Draft. He was the second quarterback selected in the first round after Seattle took San Diego State's Dan McGuire with the 16th overall pick. Todd was taken 12 picks before the next quarterback went in the second round. That quarterback was future NFL Hall of Famer Brett Favre. Todd was living like a rock star early on. In the Marinovich Project, he discussed embodying that bad boy image synonymous with the Raiders organization. He was seen partying with celebrities like Charlie Sheen and Axl Rose while ingesting Vicodin before games. From one lens, it was quite the time.
I had a bunch of money given to me by the Raider organization, and I hardly ever had to pull out my wallet in Los Angeles. I waited in no line. I very seldom had to pay for dinner. It was quite an experience.
Prior to his preseason NFL debut game in New Orleans against the Saints on Monday Night Football, he was drinking Hurricanes on Bourbon Street with airline stewardesses. When asked before the game by head coach Art Shell if he wanted to start, Todd quickly shook his head no. Todd wound up entering the game with 15 minutes left and still managed to impress those watching, moving the Raiders downfield before capping off the drive with a touchdown pass. Even with that, LA wasn't expected to push Todd into playing a significant role in his first year. The Raiders were built to win now with a defense featuring future Hall of Famers Ronnie Lott and Howie Long. They also had a loaded offense led by Marcus Allen, Roger Craig, and Tim Brown. Jay Schroeder, a 1986 Pro Bowler and Super Bowl 22 champion with Washington, was slated to open the year as the starter for the fourth consecutive season. The year was a success by most standards. The Raiders were sitting at 9-6 entering the final week of the regular season with a game against their division rivals, the Kansas City Chiefs. Schroeder suffered an injury prior to that matchup, necessitating Todd to step into the starting role. Both teams were already locked into the playoffs, but the winner would host the loser in the wildcard round the following week. Todd went from rock star backup to back in the pressure cooker. Yet with the spotlight back on him, Todd rose to the occasion. While LA lost the game 27-21, Todd was highly impressive, completing 23 of 40 passes for 243 yards. The Raiders had lost their previous 2 games, and with Schroeder still dealing with a leg injury, Todd remained the starter for the playoff game at Kansas City. He couldn't keep the success going, however, as he threw 4 interceptions in a 10-6 loss, smashing a locker room mirror with his helmet after the game. That outburst was indicative of the hell Todd was experiencing off the field. Todd's partying and drug use became astronomically worse in the NFL. Due to his arrest for cocaine, the league required him to submit for random drug testing. In the Marinovich project, Todd stated he was tested 3 times a week while many of his teammates were only tested twice in a season. He passed tests using urine samples from friends, but he was required to enter rehabilitation after his rookie season after borrowing the urine of a teammate who had been drinking heavily the night before. Todd spent 45 days in rehab after the season following an intervention by the Raiders. The following season, the Raiders started 0-2 with Schroeder at quarterback, and LA went back to Todd. Though they lost the next 2 games, there were signs of progress from Todd. He threw for 395 yards his first game, and after losing his first 2 starts, he won 3 of his next 4 to get LA to 3-5. He even threw 2 touchdown passes against the defending AFC champion Buffalo Bills. While it was far from perfect, there were glimpses of the Todd who was once one of the most sought-after prospects in the history of high school football. None of that success changed what was going on off the field or inside Todd's own mind.
A story that I share: when I was playing with the Raiders, I'm driving to practice, and it was a really popular morning talk show, and they did a poll around Los Angeles. Who would you want to be? Magic Johnson was first, and I was second, and I almost came to a halting stop and thought, if only they knew, nobody would want this life.
In Week 9 against the Dallas Cowboys, 3 of Todd's first 10 passes were intercepted, and he was benched for Schroeder. Just like that, his career with the Raiders was over. Todd Marinovich never played another down in the NFL. In 2 years, he threw just 8 touchdown passes. Things remained hellish for Todd off the field. The drug use hadn't stopped with his rehab stay, as he simply shifted to using LSD after games due to the fact that they didn't show up on drug tests. His acid usage resulted in him struggling to grasp offensive coordinator Tom Walsh's complex system. His second failed drug test led to another suspension and stay in rehab. He failed a 3rd drug test ahead of the '93 season, this time for pot, and was suspended for the entire year. He was cut by the team before the season began. Though Pittsburgh showed some interest in signing him as the 3rd-string QB in 1994, Todd opted to retire from the league, not caring for the culture of the NFL. After 2 years of traveling and listening to others tell him he should be playing, Todd decided to attempt a comeback in 1995 with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers of the Canadian Football League. His very first practice, he suffered a serious knee injury, ending his comeback bid. He decided to turn back to the arts, starting a band with some old friends, playing guitar while recovering from his knee injury. It was during this recovery process that an old friend from high school introduced him to a new drug: heroin. Todd spoke in the Marinovich project of smoking black tar heroin in the '90s while his band attempted to get a record deal done. He said that while the band met with several labels, his drug use always wound up causing things to fall apart. Eventually, Todd was arrested for heroin possession and served 3 months in jail. Todd was cleared to return to the NFL in April of 1999, but suffered a herniated disc playing rec basketball. That summer, he tried out for the Chicago Bears and San Diego Chargers, but failed his physical, leading him to sign as a backup for the BC Lions in the CFL. His weight had dropped significantly by this time due to spending virtually all his spare moments using heroin and cocaine. At one point that season, he cut his hand with a crack pipe during halftime of a game and had to bandage himself in secret. He was asked to stay with the team as a backup after the season, but departed upon realizing how bad his situation was. Todd's addiction story wasn't over yet, though. He soon found himself needing money again and signed up to play for the Los Angeles Avengers of the Arena Football League. In the Marinovich Project, Todd said this was purely about making money to feed his heroin addiction. He told a story during the documentary of having run out of money before a game against Houston, and he began to go through the early stages of heroin withdrawal. Just 2 hours before the game was set to start, Todd defecated his pants and was forced to switch into the only spare pair the team had. To put into context just how much talent Todd possessed, he still went out and threw a touchdown pass the first play of the game. Then he threw another, and another, and before he knew it, Todd wound up breaking the single-game Arena League record with 10 touchdown passes. He was named to the All-Rookie team that year and was considered the Avengers franchise player. But his addiction didn't go anywhere, as he continued to use his game checks for drugs. He was arrested for buying heroin the day he received a signing bonus, was ejected for throwing objects at a referee, and was eventually suspended for the 2001 season. For what it's worth, while he acknowledged the pressure put on him since before he was born, Todd takes full responsibility for all his actions during his addiction.
I just didn't know how to deal with life at any level. And so the added pressure, the added scrutiny played a part. How couldn't it? It's not my excuse. There are definitely no excuses. I made all those decisions.
In 2004, Todd was completely broke, having spent time living with his sister. She spoke in the Marinovich Project about driving Todd to Glendale when he suddenly bit her and jumped out of the car to run and buy heroin. That year, he was living on the Balboa Peninsula when he was arrested for skateboarding in a prohibited area while also in possession of methamphetamines and syringes. He was arrested in May of 2005 and charged with violating probation, but avoided jail time by entering rehab. He was using the public shower on a beachfront property and gave his occupation as unemployed artist and anarchist. He spent the next year going in and out of rehab before being arrested again in August of 2007 for drug possession and resisting arrest. In the course of Todd Marinovich's life, he's been arrested 9 times in Orange County alone. He was offered a suspended sentence for the 2007 arrest in exchange for regular meetings with a probation officer, random drug screenings, and attending therapy. He was kicked out of various friends' houses and began wearing out any welcome he once had. Even years after his playing career ended, the spotlight still found him anytime he got into trouble.
Because I had so much fun early on, it was so hard to let go of. It was my solution to life. And it was super hard to have my struggle and my journey publicized like it was.
The 2007 arrest was the last straw for Todd. In the Marinovich Project, he said he just got tired of being arrested. He told me it was about realizing that he just couldn't keep going like he had before.
I have been a seeker my whole life, and I did not know what I was seeking. And I sought this through all kinds of avenues. Obviously, drugs and alcohol. I tapped that one out. With every substance known to man, I wanted to try it. Maybe this is the solution. And I did it with religion. I tried many. And I felt defective because I saw people, their lives changing because they went to a place, a structure, and said these magic words. I'd never felt it. And until I was in complete desperation and knew that all of my ideas were not working, was when my life changed, when I just asked somebody else that was in a situation like myself that had found another way.
Todd began working odd jobs in 2007 to get by, including scraping barnacles off the bottom of boats, painting murals in residential homes, leading weekly meetings at rehab centers, and as a private quarterback coach. He began working with the National Drug and Alcohol Treatment Center in Newport Beach, helping other young athletes battling addiction. He celebrated a year sober in August of 2008 and was hired as a lecturer at Newport Coast Recovery. During that stretch, he began to repair the relationships in his life, especially with his family. That included Marv, who, for what it's worth, was also there for Todd when times were hard. The Marinovich Project described times in which Marv stayed with Todd during heroin withdrawals and helped him through the pain. Todd said in the documentary that Marv still loved him even when Todd didn't know how to love himself. Marv died in December of 2020 at the age of 81. When I asked Todd about it, he still spoke fondly of him.
My experience with him and what I've gained from him comes up daily. My first experience of Hawaii was with him when I was in kindergarten. We moved to Oahu because he was coaching in the World Football League with a team called the Hawaii Hawaiians, and we spent 2 years on the island, and he loved Hawaii. And so there's so many reminders, not only the place that I'm living, but what I'm doing, how I'm volunteering at the high school with football and coaching, because he did that throughout my whole life. The strength and conditioning aspect, which he went from coaching to that, and so many aspects of that. I mean, daily, Heart, how grateful I am. Because as I got older, I started to understand more, because like most father-son relationships, there's a lot of conflict, and there was at times, years of it. And then before he got sick, I loved, and was totally a new experience for me, I loved spending time with him. And I considered him my best friend his last 10, 15 years on the planet.
Todd didn't just ride off into the sunset. And like nearly everything in life, it's not a straight-up, happy-go-lucky path the rest of the way. He admitted in the Marinovich Project that he relapsed in 2009, just before the birth of his son. He was jailed for 2 months and said the fear and anxiety of becoming a father for the first time led to his slip. 2009 wasn't the last time he was arrested either. He was detained in 2016 in Irvine, California, after being found naked and in possession of drugs in the neighbor's backyard. Authorities cited him for trespassing, possession of a controlled substance, drug paraphernalia, methamphetamines, and marijuana. He was sentenced to 90 days, but was told he could avoid jail time if he had a successful rehab stay and stayed out of additional legal trouble for 36 months, which he was able to do. He also admitted to me that he'd been sober less than a year at the time we spoke. However, he's still sober and making it through each day.
I was disconnected with me, with my close friends, and with any spiritual power. I was dying. That's mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually on all levels. And so that is a great place to be, which sounds crazy. But I have found, since I've been around recovery, that is the birthplace of willingness. Because before I got to that place, I wasn't willing to do the things that it took to get better and to continue to get better, because there's no destination here. And that was a hard thing for me, because I'd always, my whole life, I was training for an event. I was training for a weekend. I was training for a season. And always there was a culmination. And I found in recovery, there's none of that. I only have today. And that's powerful all in itself. If I can just stay right here, right now, I'm good.
That stint in the Arena League wasn't the last time Todd stepped onto a football field. In 2017, he joined Development Football International, playing for the Palm Springs-based SoCal Coyotes. Todd was planning to just coach quarterbacks, but decided to make a case to play for the team. On September 17, 2017, sober, 48-year-old Todd Marinovich started a football game after not playing a snap in 17 years. Against the California Sharks, he completed 19 of 28 passes for 262 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions in a 73-0 win. He said it was the first game he played completely sober since he was 15. Age and shoulder pain prevented him from playing another game, but Todd went out on his own terms this time. He also has a family of his own now. In addition to his 2 children from his first marriage, he was engaged to be married when I spoke with him, and was set to become a stepfather to 4 others. His son, Barron, is in high school now, and has begun playing sports himself. He's taken a liking to football. His position? Quarterback. And it was that very reason why Todd decided to move his family to their current home on the Big Island of Hawaii.
I tried to redirect him his whole life when he picked up a ball for the first time. It wasn't a football. It was one of those big round red handballs that you play in elementary school. And when he did pick up a football, I wanted him to pick up a basketball. And so I gave him that. And then it was a baseball, then it was a golf club. And he just kept going, I don't want that. I want this pigskin. The reason why I moved here was to allow him to have his own experience, because we were living in Orange County, California at the time, where I played. And with the last name Marinovich, I felt like that wouldn't be fair to him. And he wants to play quarterback. So I made this move 6 months ago, and I just wanted to really find a small community that was about family first and athletics second, and I found it. And he has big aspirations, which I love. They're not my aspirations, they're his, and I'm here to support him 100%.
Todd also found his way back to his mother's influence. He makes his primary living as an artist now. While he's working on a memoir and a separate documentary from the Marinovich Project titled Buzzy, Todd's taken to coaching football now. He's the head coach of his son's high school team, and he helped lead them to a victory the night before I spoke with him the first time. There are many people who look back on Todd Marinovich's career and shake their heads. He was named one of the biggest sports flops in history back in 2004 by ESPN, and is widely viewed by many as a bust. He's also had a lot of trauma in his personal life and experienced great woe. However, when it comes to his own story, he doesn't look back on it with regret. In fact, quite the contrary.
I enjoyed winning a championship, and I only won one in all of my sporting career, and that was at USC when I was a freshman. We won the Rose Bowl. However, that is not my most fondest memories. It's not even in the top 5 of really my most important shaping experiences as an athlete. Winning the Rose Bowl wasn't. It's great to look back and say I was a part of it, being on a championship team, yes, that I get to carry with me forever. However, that didn't change me as a person. What changed me was the adversity, 100%.
My last year freelancing in New Orleans was in 2019. One of the first games I covered that football season was Isidore Newman versus Booker T. Washington. The Newman Greenies were at home and featured a slew of talented players. They'd also be starting a freshman at quarterback for the first time in 40 years. Both his uncles played quarterback for Newman, and his father was one of the best receivers in school history. His name was Arch Manning. Today, he plays football for the University of Texas. His father, Cooper, played receiver at Ole Miss before a spinal condition led to his early retirement. His grandfather, Archie, was the starting quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. His uncles, Peyton and Eli Manning, well, you've heard of them. Arch was one of the most talked about high school recruits in the country before he even stepped foot onto a varsity football field. The fact that his grandfather was a starting NFL quarterback, his father was an SEC receiver, and each of his uncles won a pair of Super Bowls obviously created a sense of wonder about his development. He also legitimately earned the hype. I even saw it in 3 games his freshman year. Over the next 4 seasons, he broke Eli's school record for career passing yards by more than 1,300 and broke Peyton's touchdown record by 23. His ability to run added his dynamic to his game as well. Add in a 6'3", 204-pound frame, and you've got a lot of reason to be excited. The hype train around him that started when he was just 14, however, was also somewhat unsettling. Even in his junior year of high school, ESPN was sending down TV crews to broadcast Newman games. A story ran in The Athletic in September of 2022 that UT spent more than $280,000 during Arch's recruiting visit. According to the article, UT spent money on a full spread in rooms at the Four Seasons, a photo shoot at DKR Texas Memorial Stadium, a trip to Topgolf, multiple lavish meals, and breakfast at the home of UT head coach Steve Sarkisian. Arch's freshman year he redshirted, playing just 1 game, attempting 5 passes, and running 3 times. Otherwise, he was 3rd on the depth chart behind starter Quinn Ewers and backup Malik Murphy. Despite all of that, Arch was estimated to have earned the 2nd most NIL money in college football, behind only Shedeur Sanders. He was believed to have brought in $3.2 million his freshman year, 4th most in college sports behind Bronny James, Livy Dunn, and Sanders. For comparison, Brock Purdy, the starting quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers and a finalist for the 2023 NFL MVP award, earned $870,000 the same season. It needs to be stated that until 2021, college athletes were prohibited from earning money of any sort per NCAA rules. However, I think given the amount of money that's now being tied up with college athletics, it's fair to look at the numbers and see how it corresponds to the amount of pressure that young athletes are facing these days. According to an AS.com article from December of 2023, more than 450,000 athletes have earned NIL endorsement deals since 2021. That same article estimated that the average income from NIL deals ranges from $1,000 to $10,000. For 2023, 7 of the top NIL earners in sports were football players, with James, Dunn, and LSU women's basketball star Angel Reese the lone exceptions. The number 10 earner, LSU quarterback Jaden Daniels, brought in $1.5 million. FrontOfficeSports.com projected that the 3rd year of NIL collectives could reach a market value of $1.17 billion. I'm not advocating against athletes earning their money. It wasn't that long ago that college athletes were making nothing at all. Think back to 2014 after the University of Connecticut won the men's basketball national championship. Tournament MVP Shabazz Napier was asked about lack of compensation for athletes after the game.
We do have hungry nights that we don't have enough money to get food in. Sometimes money is needed. I don't think you should stretch it out to hundreds of thousands of dollars for playing, because a lot of times guys don't know how to handle themselves with money. I feel like a student athlete. Sometimes there's hungry nights where I'm not able to eat, but I still gotta play up to my capabilities.
It wasn't just him. In 2015, All-Pro cornerback Richard Sherman was quoted by Sports Illustrated as saying,
"They're upset when a student athlete says they need a little cash. Well, I can tell you from experience, I had negative $40 in my account. Usually my account was in the negative more times than it was in the positive. You've got to make decisions on whether you get gas for your car or whether you get a meal for the day. You've got one of the 2 choices, and people think, oh, you're on scholarship. They pay for your room and board, they pay for your education, but to their knowledge, you're there just to play football. You're not on scholarship for school, and it sounds crazy when a student athlete says that, but those are the conversations and things that coaches tell them every single day. You're not on scholarship for school.
Obviously, we shouldn't be advocating for a return to that. But the fact remains that the amount of money flowing in has now begun adding more pressure than ever before. With that in mind, in addition to getting Todd's feedback, I thought I'd bring in a couple of mental health professionals.
My name is Jannell Kalifey, and I am a licensed clinical social worker practicing in New Orleans, Louisiana.
I found Jannell on Google, and she was recommended by another social worker that I know and trust. She's worked with a variety of youth athletes from the high school and college levels and sees the kind of pressures facing younger athletes these days.
Athletes are under a tremendous amount of pressure, I think more today than ever because of social media. When you have young athletes that are starting to train as early as 3 and 4 years old, the idea of getting a college scholarship has become way more competitive, I think, than it ever used to be. So athletes have all kinds of pressures, and that can take a toll on mental health, just like it can on physical health. So we see people who develop anxiety as a result of it, stress, can't sleep, appetite problems, depression. Sometimes the pressure affects performance. They can do great in practice when there's no pressure, but show up to the game and all your followers watching every single thing you do, and performance can start to suffer.
Something else that can happen when young athletes begin to feel too pressured is they stop seeing what's beyond the game. When the lights go out and they step off the field, they go back to being just like everyone else. One day, they step off the field for the last time, and they haven't even begun to think about what happens next. According to data released by the NCAA in April of 2020, there were 480,000 athletes competing across Divisions 1, 2, and 3. Baseball had the highest number of athletes, with 36,011, but even that was believed to be out of 482,740 high school baseball participants across the country. In other words, just 7.5% of high school baseball players make it to the next level. If you're a male high school athlete, your best chance of playing college sports is in lacrosse, where a minuscule 12.8% of high school players earn scholarships. Aside from hockey, which was just behind at 12.3%, your chances of playing college athletics at any level are less than 10% in all sports, including 7.3% in football, where the NCAA estimated over 1 million athletes competed at the high school level. The numbers aren't much better for women either. The highest number of competitors is in track and field, with 30,326. But that's still just 6.2% of all competitors at the high school level. Women's ice hockey is your best bet at 26.2%, but that's out of just 9,650 high school participants. Lacrosse came in at 12.5% and field hockey at 10.1%. All of that is to say, you're probably not going to be playing beyond the high school level. Even if you do, a much more commonly known statistic is that almost nobody ends up making it to the pros. Just 2% of all college athletes end up playing professionally. Baseball had the highest rate at 9%, mostly due to the fact that MLB's draft lasts 20 rounds. Men's and women's basketball and men's ice hockey all came in at 1%. Men's soccer and football each came in at 2%. Even if you make it pro, the life of an athlete is short. The average length of an NFL career is 3.3 years, while the NBA is just 4.5. While many will point out that that's due to the high number of players who give it a try and give up after just a few months, even the ones that last are typically done before they're 40. That's before you even take into account the potential for injuries. The point is, many people get so focused on the goal in front of them, they lose sight of everything else. When the time comes to stop playing, they often don't know what to do with themselves.
Because you start training so early that your whole identity is that. You're a golfer, you're a football player. It's called the athletic identity. And it's huge when that goes away. For a lot of people, unless they're a fully developed person, they would often find themselves in a crisis. If you're used to going and hanging out with your teammates and going on the trips, and that's your whole life, and all of a sudden you can't play anymore, and you're not going on the bus with everybody, and you're not doing things, then it's like, do you have other friends? Do you have other interests? How are you going to get those needs met? Because certainly exercising at that level of frequency has done something chemically to your body. And all of a sudden, you're not going to have that anymore.
We also have to discuss social media, which is a critical component in athletics these days. The previously mentioned AS.com article explained that while commercials and print advertising can factor into NIL, most of the money is coming from social media posts. As mentioned earlier, Livy Dunn says she can make $500,000 on a single post. While we'll delve much deeper into social media and its impact on athletes in Part 3, we couldn't talk about pressure in athletics without bringing up social media. It's the same social media pressure and the financial ties that come with it that helped create situations like the San Miguels. It's why you have kids waking up earlier and dedicating more and more time to athletics than ever before. Add in the kind of money that is now being involved, and it's no wonder that parents have their kids investing more time in sports preparation. More particularly, they're focusing on one sport individually, as opposed to allowing kids to spread out and try different sports. In some ways, the kids aren't just being kids anymore. They're being specifically trained and focused for one thing and one thing only.
There's some research that shows that early sports specialization is not in the best interest of the athlete. When you have kids that are training like professional athletes, high schoolers who are training 30 hours a week, going to school at 4 a.m., staying after, getting home at 10 o'clock at night, I mean, the physical and mental toll on that. First of all, your development is not, quote, normal when you are training. I mean, your hormonal development, your social development, all of it kind of goes awry. And so the other thing with sports specialization is overuse injuries. I'm treating college athletes who their freshman year, when I do their evaluation on them, they've had 3 surgeries their freshman year of high school, or they've had 4 concussions already. And these are 18-year-olds or a 15-year-old who's had a back surgery already. So you fast forward that, what does that look like when this person is 30?
These days, there's recruiting websites such as 24/7 Sports and Rivals.com following prep recruits from as early as middle school. Those same kids are jumping on Twitter and Instagram to try and increase their following and attract coaches' attention. But it also attracts even more criticism. Even during my time covering Arch, other kids on Twitter were calling him overrated. By his senior year, national outlets were saying that he'd be a 3-star recruit if his last name wasn't Manning. While that may seem light compared to what some people have to deal with, the fact is, he was literally just a kid. That's to say nothing of what some parents might say during a game, or the kind of thing parents say to their own children at home. Sometimes it comes from those former athletes who never learned about themselves beyond the sport that they played.
I've heard someone refer to it as the ghost on the sidelines, which are the parents sometimes who were former athletes or wanted to be and have their own unrealized dreams that they're trying to live out through the kids. The coaches have them too. There's just such an intensity around it. That's something that's supposed to be fun. When I have high schoolers coming to my office and they're crying because it's just not fun anymore. Something that they loved now becomes this huge source of anxiety. Some are relieved when they get injured because then they get to take a break from it.
I started my family really late, thank God. I was 40 when my son was born. And so most of my friends that I played with in college, I got to experience their little leagues and youth football and got to see where that culture has taken a quantum leap from when I was a youth in some very negative ways. Obviously, there's also some positives to it too. Those experiences early on shaped me to be able to block out the pressures of college athletics, pro football, which are at a level today that is more so than when I played, which is unthinkable because it was so big then that without foundation that I had playing all three sports, because I played baseball, football, and basketball, they all complemented each other. And so when I see parents with a focus of let's just have our son or daughter play just one, I think they're missing out. I think they're missing the boat, because does the ends justify the means?
Keep in mind that Todd played at the highest level of college football that there is and started in the NFL. Yet listen to what he has to say when he reflects back on the pressure he faced in high school.
Looking back on it, it was the scariest time on the field that I've ever experienced. So when I was in the huddle as a rookie, looking at 12-year veterans in the huddle, and some of them saying, I've got kids older than you, Todd, and I'd have to motivate them, and reporters would ask me, God, how is that? And I said, it compares nothing to being a 15, 14-year-old playing with 18-year-olds in high school. That just maturity level alone is the biggest jump for humans.
Parents are starting kids younger and younger, even though that actually may be more detrimental to their development than anything. A high school coach I know said he wouldn't let his own kids play football until middle school, and that most Pee Wee and Pop Warner football leagues just train kids to be better middle school players. In case you were wondering, here's what Todd's approach was with his own son.
There's just so much information today about concussions that I think it's completely unsafe. And that's my job as a parent today, is to protect him as much as I can. And as he started getting older, getting closer, and then in the 8th grade, I was like, oh my God, it's upon us. Is it really safe for him? And I can't tell you that it is. I know the rules have changed. It's becoming safer, but it's not safe. But it's something that he wants to do, and so I'm allowing him to do that.
I'm sure by now some of you might be saying, well, isn't pressure a part of life? It's good for kids to learn how to deal with that at a young age. You're absolutely right. Some pressure is actually a great thing. You don't have to just take my word for it either.
My name is Dr. Finlayson, and I am a licensed sports psychologist.
Dr. Finlayson works for Premier Sports Psychology, a PLLC based in Minnesota. While their client list is privileged, sports psychologists from Premier have been interviewed by outlets such as NBC News and the Big Ten Network. Dr. Finlayson has a Master's of Education from North Dakota State and a Doctor of Psychology degree from St. Mary's University in Minnesota.
At a certain level, pressure for athletes is a part of the game. Competition adds some pressure, being competitive, wanting to do well. So there's usually always some element of pressure when you're an athlete. But I think what we're seeing now is increased pressure from parents, social media pressure, the exposure that athletes have online to things like toxic comments and all that kind of thing. I would say it's increased significantly. One of the things that we try to help athletes with when it comes to dealing with pressure is that, first of all, to make friends a little bit with the pressure and to kind of help them to reframe what it is. And actually, a little bit of pressure can help a person to perform better. And so sometimes if we come at it with this view of like, I need to kind of get rid of this or try to avoid it, it's not super helpful. And so we try to help them to understand it a little better.
When I first sat down to try and put this podcast together in 2019, I spoke with a collegiate gymnast named Olivia Lubarski from Towson University. Regrettably, the audio from her interview is now lost, but I'll never forget something that she mentioned to me. When she suffered a sprained ankle or an ACL injury, there was a rehab process. There was an expectation that you'd have to miss time to recover. There was a medical staff in place to help her get better. But when she found herself dealing with anxiety and depression, there was nothing. That's because it's largely up to individual schools to set up their own mental health facilities. While some schools, such as Stanford or the University of Texas, may have the size, finances, and resources to provide such help, a Division II or III school may not. Much of that is based on what is available to them, but part of that is on the demand. While there's more people talking about mental health these days than ever, there's still a lot of negativity around the conversation. When Dallas Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott announced that he battled depression during the COVID-19 pandemic, Fox Sports analyst Skip Bayless was critical of him, saying he was unsympathetic towards his revelation. When Naomi Osaka withdrew from the 2021 French Open, citing a need to focus on her mental health, many athletes praised her decision, but there were still many who criticized her and called her soft for not being able to deal with the media's scrutiny. Simone Biles had plenty of defenders when she withdrew from several competitions during the 2021 Olympics due to dealing with the twisties and feeling a need to focus on her mental health. But others referred to her as a quitter, with some saying she was selfish for taking a spot on the team that would have gone to someone else. In Russia, where the Olympics were being held, the state-owned media slammed her with racist, sexist, and transphobic comments, while also accusing her of being a drug dealer. While it wasn't long ago that the universal opinion of her would have been negative, and now it's not, it also shows that we still have some growing left to do, as Jannell and Dr. Finlayson can tell you.
Unfortunately, there's still a stigma around mental health. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done. I think the more and more people come out and talking about it on podcasts like this, professional athletes who are coming out, college athletes, all of that helps. It helps to normalize the conversations. I think because all the stress that athletes were under, we saw so many collegiate athletes suicide during the pandemic. It looks like they have it all together, but on the inside they're drowning. And there's still a fear of going to the counseling office or reaching out for help.
I think one of the most important things is to really view it through the lens of a medical condition, either needing to take time off to go get treatment or needing some different living situation because of this. Really, for all of us to be viewing it through that lens.
Football is making more money than ever before. On Christmas Day, 2023, CBS's broadcast of a game between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Las Vegas Raiders was viewed by an average of 29.171 million people. It was CBS's most watched Christmas Day program in network history, and the highest rated NFL game on Christmas Day since 1989. ESPN announced their Monday Night Football game the same day between San Francisco and Baltimore was the second most watched Monday Night Football game in 27 years, with an audience of 27.235 million people. On the same day, 5 NBA games combined for a total of 14.1 million views. It's not hard to see that football is bigger than ever when you take all those numbers into consideration.
It's insane the amount of pressure that we put not only on our own kids, but just young people that play sports. Because I go back to UST and it's great. And when I go back, they have a Salute to Troy event where they honor a past team. And I was there, long story short. The current players are there without all the armor. And I was blown away at their youth. Because you don't see that on TV with all the glitz and glamour of Saturday football. They look like warriors, armor, and they don't look human. They look superhuman. And then I got to see them strip down and I was like, oh my gosh, these are kids. And it's a huge business. There's gambling involved. There's billions of dollars riding on these universities if they make bowl games. It is crazy.
With the numbers continuing to roll in, it also seems like the sport will only continue to grow with time. With that should mean even greater performances and athletes, but it also means more issues. A study by the British Journal of Sports Medicine in July of 2023 showed that around 40% of elite athletes may experience some kind of common mental disorder. The same study says athletes are twice as common as non-athletes to experience anxiety. In the fall of 2021, a year after the COVID-19 pandemic caused a myriad of issues across the sports landscape, 24% of male college athletes and 36% of female college athletes reported feeling so depressed that it was difficult to function. While those numbers are down tremendously in the years since the pandemic, it still goes to show the impact that pressure is having on young athletes. With the introduction of NIL, as well as widespread legalization of sports betting, there's more money involved than ever before. More money can lead to higher stakes, higher pressure, and higher levels of stress. In other words, as Biggie said, mo money, mo problems.
That's college football. The size of it, like modern day where I played in Orange County, they are transferring kids from all over the state to play during the fall, and then they go back to their high schools that they live. I mean, if that's not college, I don't know what is. And then the college game today is the NFL, and now the NFL is just a whole another level than when I played. So like anything, there's substantial growth because it's a business at all levels. And what's getting lost in the shuffle are human beings.
While we could do a whole series on pressure alone, and it will continue to come up throughout the rest of this podcast, there was something that Todd mentioned that I couldn't shake.
So thank God for sports, and I really think it was my first drug.
I mentioned earlier that I'm a recovering alcoholic, but long before I picked up my first beer, I was hooked on sports. So many things about sports remind me of my drinking days sometimes. So I thought, for the second episode of this series, there was only one topic truly fitting to discuss: addiction. When the Lights Go Out was written, directed, produced, and edited by me, Hart Pisani. Dave Chappelle was voiced by Jared Lyons. Marv Marinovich was voiced by Quentin Williams. Douglas S. Looney was voiced by Kat Forster. Richard Sherman was voiced by Alan Roberson. Shabazz Napier was voiced by Peter Sather. Jake San Miguel was voiced by Mario Jerez. J.J. Watt was voiced by Jim Derry. Chris Long was voiced by Aiden Bro. The logo was designed by Kayla Goforth. The music was licensed through Artlist.io. The music used was by Nobuo, Yehezkel Raz, Donny Hadani, We Dream of Eden, Sero, Gia Lee, Nsi, Muted, and Yoed Nir. The interviews were recorded using Zoom, while the episode was pieced together using Descript and published using Spotify for podcasters. Special thanks to Preston Moore, Jared Lyons, and Alex Sharp. Next up, Episode 2, Bushwhacked.